Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. Today we are doing one of our quick builds, where we'll be exploring a briefly summarized character build for Dungeons & Dragons. As always with our quick builds, if there's ever a build you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. The concept for our build today comes from user Open World Addict. Open World wanted to see a Barbarian Monk multi-class through the lens of a raging wrestler. They are a martial artist who fights with their fists instead of weapons, and I assume that also includes kicking and headbutting enemies as well. They can throw several unarmed strikes in a row, as well as grab their enemies and take the fight to the ground as an actual wrestler should. Now, I did go back and check whether 2014 or 2024 rules were the way to conduct this build, given that 2014 rules are a little bit more restrictive in how we would be able to get exactly what we're looking for. 2024 rules, on the other hand, provide more support for monks as a whole and have some improvements to Barbarian as well, and can really make this build come to life. So 2024 is the way to go. Honestly, besides that though, I don't really think there is much else to talk about in terms of setup for this build. It's a big, beefy martial artist character. Pick your favorite character from a fighting game, or perhaps another game or piece of popular media, and keep them in mind as kind of the theme of what we're going for. We're not being any one specific character, we're just going for the big, beefy wrestler / martial artist who is going to take the enemy to Pound Town. Who is going to absolutely pack a punch against their enemies. Jumping into the build now, starting with our origin. For our species, we are going to be a Goliath. I think Goliath fits the best thematically for a big, raging wrestler character, though admittedly there is a very good argument for literally any other species, because any species should be able to fit this build. Goliath gives us a bit of fun theme with our giant ancestry. You can of course pick any giant ancestry you want. They all provide some very neat effects. And we'll also get large form. Large form will genuinely help us with this build, since it'll let us grapple and wrestle larger enemies. Going on to our background now. In terms of the background we want, I'm just going to go with Sailor because it gives us exactly what we want stat-wise and origin feat-wise for the build, but feel free to pick any background that you would like from a previous edition if you want to mix and match the origin feat as well as the ability score improvements, and you just didn't feel like Sailor fit thematically for your character, or make a custom background from the 2024 DMG. Either way, world is your oyster, but for us, our oyster is Sailor, and with Sailor, we're going to pick up the Tavern Brawler origin feat, as well as increase our strength and dexterity by +2 and +1, improving strength by +2 and dexterity by +1. Tavern Brawler right away gives us the first steps towards making this martial artist character. Our unarmed strikes are now going to deal a d4. That doesn't really matter because they're going to be increased really quickly. But we can also re-roll ones on any damage roll we make with an unarmed strike, and that is going to always be beneficial for us. Plus, we have the push ability, which says that once per turn, when we hit an enemy with an unarmed strike, we can choose to do both damage and push them 5 feet. We don't have to make a choice in that specific instance. That's a really nice small buff. It kind of feels like a miniature version of weapon mastery, which is something we're not getting, or at least not using, on this character. Now finally, in terms of our stats, we're going to want the following array of ability scores. We want 17 strength, putting 9 points into it to get it to 15, as well as our +2. We want to put 5 points into dexterity, and then a +1 to get it to 14. We're going to put 7 points into Constitution to get that to 14 as well. We'll put 1 point into Intelligence, or it could be Charisma, it's up to you, but that's just our last point and we don't really have anywhere else to put it, so we'll throw it there for now. And then we'll put 5 points into Wisdom to get us to 13 Wisdom. Like the request had said, we are still very multi-ability score dependent because we want to try and be strength-based, even though, yes, technically you could come at this build from a dex-based perspective and not have to worry about strength too much. For us though, we're going to go full rage, full strength, and those are the stats we want. Starting now into the actual level breakdown of our build, we're going to look at the 4 tiers of play, levels 1 to 5, 6 to 10, so on and so forth. But before I do, I want to quickly mention that this build in particular is going to A, come online relatively quickly, and B, have 2 types of play styles, one for sort of lower tier play and one for higher tier play. In the lower tiers, from levels 1 to about 10 or so, we will no question focus on being a raging wrestler trying to grapple enemies, take them to the ground if we have to, and just generally pummel them like that. After that though, we're going to start to grab some more features that improve our mobility, which is already pretty good thanks to being a monk. Once that comes around, I'll talk about some of the really interesting and crazy things we can do with having such a high mobility on this type of grappler character. Now, starting with tier 1, by level 5, we are going to be a monk 4 and a barbarian 1. I said the build comes online quickly, and it will be fully online as far as what we really desperately need by level 5. That's because we need at least 1 level in Barbarian to actually have Rage to be a raging wrestler, and we also need the general feat Grappler, which we have to wait till level 4 to pick up anyways. Barbarian 1 with Rage is going to give us some great resistances and extra damage, which is great to improve our durability since our durability is going to really suffer otherwise. And the extra damage is going to pair very, very nicely with Flurry of Blows. Grappler, on the other hand, is our build's bread and butter. It's going to let us increase our strength to 18 first and foremost, which is great on its own. It's also going to let us do push and grab, which says that when we hit an enemy with an unarmed strike, just like our Tavern Brawler push ability, we can choose to do both damage and grapple an enemy as part of the same attack. It's only once per turn, but it's great to have that option. Plus, once we have an enemy grappled, we will then permanently have advantage on attacks against that enemy. That also pairs really well with Rage and Flurry of Blows. And we have Fast Wrestler. Fast Wrestler is the really powerful feature that says that we don't have to spend any extra movement to move with a grappled creature, so long as that creature is our size or smaller. And that's where large form comes in. Now, I don't really know if it matters too much as to when you take your first level in Barbarian. If you want some extra health, you can start with it and then go Monk. Or if you want your unarmed strikes to be a lot better, a lot quicker, you can start with Monk and pick up Barbarian later on. But either way, once we have all of these features, we will be able to run up, do an unarmed strike against the enemy, grapple them at the same time, and then start wailing on them. If we want to be an actual wrestler and take the fight to the ground, there's a few different ways we can do that. First of all, we can choose to do the shove option of our unarmed strike instead of dealing damage. Another way that we could do that I think should be logically legal, though technically there's no rules on it, because grappling that enemy no longer impacts our speed, we should be able to use our movement to drop prone and bring the enemy down with us. Like I said, there's no real rules supporting that or against it, and Grappler no longer has that extra action where we could try to pin an enemy via restraining them. I think that it should be completely fair for us to grapple an enemy and then drop prone with them in tow, given that we'll eventually be able to run them like 60 feet, if not farther, around the battlefield. The final way that we could also drop an enemy prone is through Warrior of the Open Hand. Warrior of the Open Hand is our subclass. I will do a quick shout out to Warrior of the Elements Monk for being a thematically cool choice, because we could be a Goliath with a giant ancestry like fire, storm, frost, etc. And we could deal the damage through our unarmed strikes associated with that giant ancestry. It's just something neat to think about. For us though, we like open hand because it's going to give us open hand technique. And open hand technique says that when we hit a creature with an attack from Flurry of Blows, we can use one of the following effects on that target. We can addle them to make it so that they can't take opportunity attacks until the start of their next turn. We can push them so they have to make a strength save or potentially get pushed 15 feet away from us. Or we can topple them. This is essentially the topple weapon mastery, only instead of targeting a constitution save, it targets a dexterity save. Now, all of these options are really nice to have because they feel like more mini weapon masteries for our unarmed strikes. The issue is that our wisdom sucks, and all of the features that we use focus points to trigger that require saves are all going to be based off of our wisdom score. So it's nice to have these options, but honestly, they're not going to be the most reliable. Jumping up to tier 2 now, we have pretty much our main gameplay loop. It's time to just get extra things that are icing on the cake. We definitely want to go one more level into Monk in order to get extra attack, and then afterwards, whether right away or later down the line, we want a second level in Barbarian. That's going to get us Reckless Attack. Reckless Attack isn't going to be super helpful for us as much as it is to other barbarians. The reason is because of Grappler. As long as we're attacking an enemy that we have grappled, we already have advantage, so we don't need Reckless Attack. But in those niche scenarios where we're fighting an enemy that can't be grappled, or maybe we already have our hands full with 2 grappled enemies and we're attacking a third one, Reckless Attack will definitely help, and we'll be happy to have it on Flurry of Blows. After we have those 2 levels, we're going to continue up to Monk 8, and that is going to get us other good, though not as good for us, features, such as Wholeness of Body. Wholeness of Body got changed, so it's no longer one big heal, but a lot of mini heals. But those mini heals are all based off of our Wisdom modifier, which as we know, is not the greatest. We'll also gain Stunning Strike, a very classic Monk feature, Empowered Strikes, so we can now deal force damage instead of bludgeoning damage with unarmed strikes, and we'll of course gain Evasion, another staple for Monk durability. Level 8, we get our next feat, and this feat is really something that synergizes with us, though it's not necessarily something we desperately need. We're going to pick up Charger. Charger, again, lets us increase our strength, so we're now at 19, plus whenever we take the dash action, our speed increases by 10 feet for that action specifically. And if we move at least 10 feet in a straight line before hitting an enemy as part of the attack action, we can choose to either deal extra damage or push them 10 feet away from us. That's also just a once per turn ability, but if we wanted to grapple an enemy and we move up to get in melee range of them, dealing some extra damage certainly isn't going to hurt. Plus, we could either stack that 10-foot push onto our Tavern Brawler 5-foot push, or hit 2 different enemies and use both of those pushes on each enemy, adding a little bit more battlefield control. Plus, the really nice thing about Charger is that the push from Charger affects enemies up to 1 size larger than us, meaning we could push a giant or other huge sized creature if we are in our large form. The really nice thing though that may get overlooked is actually the increased speed to dashing. This pairs very well with Monk Step of the Wind, because Step of the Wind along with Patient Defense were both changed in 2024. No longer do they require a focus point or key point to use. Instead, they can always be used to do their basic effect. For Step of the Wind, that is, give us the dash action as a bonus action. We then can spend a focus point to get an additional effect of getting the disengage action as part of that same bonus action. For us, just having the option to use Step of the Wind as a bonus action to dash and then gaining an extra 10 feet speed boost is really going to be helpful, especially later on down the line. Going into tier 3 now, we have been a raging wrestler with a lot of martial artist capabilities, and we're really good at grappling enemies, and we're starting to get into that mobility playstyle that I was talking about. Now, it's actually time to take a break from Monk, though, in order to pick up more of those Barbarian features that we wanted, just like the request mentioned. We really want to get up to at least Barbarian 7 to pick up Feral Instinct and Instinctive Pounce. So, we're going to do that here. We're just putting 5 levels into Barbarian to get our subclass, another feat, which, spoiler alert, it's going to be speedy. Don't think too hard about it. We're definitely going to want it on this build. We also get extra attack, again, which really does nothing for us, but fast movement, which we get at Barbarian 5 as well, does help us. We get our second subclass feature, which I'll talk about in 1 second, and then we get Feral Instinct and Instinctive Pounce. Now, in terms of our subclass, we're going to go Zealot, and we're not going to think twice about it. What we really want Zealot for is the durability increase. Warrior of the Gods gets us an extra pool of dice to be able to heal ourselves with, and this is going to be way more reliable than our Wholeness of Body feature. Likewise, Fanatical Focus says that once per rage, if we fail a saving throw, we can re-roll it with a bonus equal to our rage damage bonus. We have to use the new roll, but any re-roll on a failed save is helpful. Finally, let's talk about Feral Instinct and Instinctive Pounce. Feral Instinct is a really nice feature that just flat out gives us advantage on initiative rolls. That is going to be helpful for us going first to maybe grapple an enemy, take them away from combat, get them out of there really quickly. On the off chance that an ally of yours, that is maybe a caster that has to set up an ability first, has the alert feat, technically, if we get a better initiative than they do, we could swap initiatives with them. They could cast whatever spell or perhaps emanation effect that they have, and then we could follow up after them, grappling them and carrying them around the battlefield. Whether or not that would be allowed at your table for grappling an ally and carrying them around while they have something like Spirit Guardians up is up to you, and I'm not going to tell you whether or not you can or can't do that. I'm just saying if that's something your table does allow, this is definitely an option under the right circumstances. Regardless, we're happy to have advantage on initiative rolls flat out. Instinctive Pounce is actually what we care more about at this level though. It says that as a part of the bonus action we take to rage, we can move up to half our speed for free. Now for most barbarians, this is a really nice extra little bit of mobility to help them get into combat and start swinging at those enemies. For us, it does the same thing, but it's gonna get a little bit ridiculous. Going up to tier 4 now, we will talk about why Feral Instinct is so ridiculous for us specifically, but first we have to go up 3 levels into Monk to get us to Monk 11, then finish off levels 19 and 20 with Barbarian 4 and Monk 12 to get both those ASI levels in order to get 2 epic boons. Before we talk about them, let's jump back to Feral Instinct. Feral Instinct pairs so well with us because of the other features that we're going to pick up as a monk. Things like acrobatic movement to be able to move up and down vertical surfaces. And with the Warrior of the Open Hands, Fleet Step ability. Fleet Step says that whenever we take a bonus action that is not Step of the Wind, we can do Step of the Wind immediately after that bonus action. Really, that just means that after we take a bonus action, we can dash. Now, you can also add a focus point onto Step of the Wind still to gain the extra rider effects. But even if you don't, what this means is that no matter what bonus action we take, we can dash right afterwards. This is where we start to have an argument for raging on round 2. Round 1, if we run up to an enemy that we really want to grapple and take out of the fight, we can try and do that. Maybe we even increase our size to become size large with large form thanks to being a Goliath. Round 2, after we have grappled them, assuming they either haven't been able to escape our grapple or if we spend our attack action to grapple them again, we can now use our bonus action to rage. Because we are using our bonus action to rage, we can use Feral Instinct to go half of our movement. Our movement as a level 11 Goliath monk is 55 feet, but we have Speedy, so it's actually 65. That means we can move, rounding down, about 30 feet as part of the Rage bonus action. Because Rage is not Step of the Wind, we can then perform Step of the Wind immediately afterwards. That gives us 65 feet of movement. But it's actually 75 because Step of the Wind is still the dash action. And whenever we dash, we increase our speed by 10 feet. So we can take the enemy that we have grappled, sprint away 30 feet, and then an additional 75 feet, probably stopping somewhere in the middle of our Step of the Wind movement to let the enemy go. If we have enough space to be able to just run them out of combat, so it's going to take them a few turns to get back, we should definitely do that. But if we're near a vertical surface of some kind, there's very little stopping us from just grabbing them or having already grabbed them last turn, running them up the wall, dropping them, running back down, using our attack action or other attack if we already started our attack action to grapple them again, run back up, and drop them again. Obviously, this is pretty exploitative of what we can do with our mobility and the new grapple rules, but I think it is interesting to think about, given that now it's incentivizing us to actually save our rage until these prime opportunities. Instead of just trying to rage turn 1 like a regular barbarian would and rush into the battle, we actually want to already be in the fight before we rage, use the extra rage mobility from Instinctive Leap to then take off and really add that battlefield control in. Of course, if that wasn't crazy enough, we can also add more through our epic boons. Our epic boons that we want are probably going to be irresistible offense, so we can ignore resistance to bludgeoning damage, because on the off chance that an enemy we fight has resistance to both force and bludgeoning damage, we can now get past that resistance. And if we do land a critical hit, we will be able to deal extra damage equal to our strength modifier, which should be at least 20 at this point, hopefully. The other epic boon, I am pretty torn between either Boon of Recovery to just give us that extra little bit of durability, given that at level 20 we'd be fighting very powerful enemies, or it could also be Boon of Speed, a flat 30-foot movement speed increase that can just add to the meme of us running enemies or allies around the battlefield. We are a full taxi service. Either way, you pick your favorite epic boons to go with whatever playstyle you want, whether you're using that mobility or still just focusing on grappling enemies and taking them to the ground. And other than that, that's the build. Overall, we are definitely a raging wrestler monk. Now, in all honesty, in 2024, I don't really know how much Barbarian is actually providing us. It is giving us some nice bonuses on the one hand of rage plus flurry of blows, as well as instinctive pounce, and a few other nice features such as feral instinct, our zealot subclass for extra durability, all that. On the other hand, though, we could have been a full dexterity and wisdom-based monk in order to really improve those abilities and still be able to grapple enemies and have that really high movement speed to pick them up and run them around the battlefield. That's nothing unique to our Barbarian. That is kind of a broad strokes way to look at it, given that we're not really accounting for theme or the concept of the character we want to play at the table. We're just looking at purely what we could do based on the 2024 classes compared to each other. But really, I think it is neat that we can pull off this strength-based raging monk, given that in 2014, you could still do the same sort of thing. It was just tougher. Now, in terms of what we actually can do, there's quite a lot. First of all, our unarmed strikes are D10s. They also reroll 1s, which is pretty great since that's like having a mini fighting style. Once per turn, we can also deal damage and push an enemy 5 feet, or we can push an enemy and grapple them. As well, we can add in Charger for extra damage once per turn, or another 10-foot push once per turn. All of those combined together feel like what we would be missing from weapon masteries, so we don't have any weapons we actually want to use on this character. We also have permanent advantage against any targets that we are grappling, and should we be able to take them to the floor, our allies will have permanent advantage against them as long as we maintain that grapple and keep the enemies prone. That is pretty handy. Most of that we actually got really early on, before level 10 even, and everything else on top of that, like all our mobility and speed buffs, has all just been icing on the cake. Overall, I think this really fits the fantasy of a strong wrestler, martial artist type character, with a little bit of unexpected added flavor of being a very speedy character. It wasn't as easy to execute back in 2014, but it's nice to see that in 2024 it can come together so fluidly with all these other features synergizing so well. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you would add or change to get closer to the theme of a raging wrestler type of martial artist character. And thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.